The first time I lied in court, my hands trembled, but the second time, they didn't. I was 62 when I took the stand and shattered my own truth to save the two men I loved most, my husband Richard and our only son, Ethan. They were facing charges that would have sent them both away for years: embezzlement, insurance fraud, obstruction of justice. The evidence was stacked high, but I was the missing piece. I had access, I had motive, I had love, and I had just enough credibility to make the truth disappear. So I did what I thought any devoted wife and mother would do. I buried the facts beneath a trembling oath, swearing under God that I had acted alone. My lawyer begged me not to. The prosecutor called me delusional. The judge looked at me like I was a walking tragedy. But the jury believed me. I walked out of that courthouse with a suspended sentence and a lifetime of rot gnawing at my soul. Richard and Ethan walked free. And for a while, I believed I had done the right thing. But freedom has a twisted way of revealing the monsters you swore didn't exist. The day after the verdict, Richard didn't even come home. He drained our accounts and disappeared with his secretary, a girl who'd once called me Mama Lynn when she visited for Sunday pot roast. Ethan stayed, but not out of love. He stayed because I had a pension, because I still had the house, because he needed a place to stash his growing anger and disappointment. He started drinking before noon, started calling me names that made my dead mother turn in her grave. When I asked him to get a job, he shattered a plate against the wall and screamed that I owed him for ruining his life with that pathetic performance. I learned to stay silent. I learned to clean up quietly. I learned to flinch before the blow landed. The beatings didn't start all at once. No, they began like whispers, tight grips on my wrists, bruises masked as accidents, apologies served with flowers bought with my own money. But soon they became full symphonies of pain. My ribs cracked. My eyes swelled shut. My voice, once strong and sharp, learned to curl into itself like a dying leaf. And still, I told no one. Not my sister. Not the neighbor who stopped making eye contact. Not the nurse who gently dabbed at my stitched eyebrow and whispered, "You don't have to live like this." Because how could I confess? How could I admit I'd traded justice for chains? But people break. Even iron rusts. And the day he kicked me down the stairs for asking about rent money, something shifted. I lay crumpled on the floor, tasting blood and betrayal, and all I could think was he's becoming his father, or maybe he always was. That night, I didn't cry. I planned. I crawled to the guest room, locked the door, and sat beside the dresser drawer where I kept every document, every password, every secret Richard and Ethan thought I was too stupid to understand. They forgot I was the one who filed their taxes, balanced the books, covered their tracks. They forgot that a woman's silence doesn't mean ignorance. It means patience. This is the story of how I made them pay. And not with bullets or poison, but with fear, shame, and the kind of retribution that seeps into the bones. The kind of revenge that smiles sweetly, then takes everything you ever loved and burns it to ash in your lap. I was done being the mother who sacrificed. I became something else entirely. Before you hear what I did next, I want you to ask yourself something. Would you burn down your own house to kill the monsters inside it? Because I did. And I don't regret it. If you've ever felt betrayed, broken, or underestimated, you're not alone. Twisted Tales and Truths tell stories that dig deep and cut sharp. Like, share, and subscribe, then brace yourself. The story gets darker from here. I stopped marking the bruises on the calendar after I ran out of clean days to circle. They blended together, his rage, my silence, and the way the walls of our once warm home seemed to lean inward, hungry to witness the next assault. The house became a tomb, and I was the ghost wandering inside it, still breathing, still cooking dinner, still folding his laundry, but long since dead where it counted. One night, Ethan came home drunk again, slurring about money he was owed and friends who had betrayed him. He grabbed me by the hair because I hadn't washed his lucky sweatshirt. Said I was trying to sabotage his life like I sabotaged Dad's. He didn't know I had already started recording him, small, hidden cameras tucked into air vents, fake smoke detectors, even a photo frame. I'd watched enough crime documentaries to know that truth is worthless without proof. So I gave him rope. I let him yell. I let him hit. I let the camera catch it all. He passed out that night on the couch with a beer bottle clutched like a childhood toy, unaware that I had downloaded every frame of his violence onto 3 separate drives and mailed one to a P.O. box I'd set up under a fake name. I was done being a doormat. I was preparing to be the executioner. But it wasn't just about him. Richard was still out there too. I knew where, thanks to an old friend at the bank who owed me more than a favor. Florida. Boca Raton. Living in a condo with ocean views and the secretary half his age, who now wore my pearls. He'd stashed the embezzled money in a shell corporation he thought I didn't know existed. But I had the documents. The emails. The signatures. He was dirty, and I had scrubbed him clean for years. I spent my days pretending to age quietly, making casseroles, taking blood pressure pills I didn't need, going to book clubs I loathed, while underneath it all, I built a new identity. I learned to forge like a pro. I studied digital finance. I learned the dark web's pulse. I even charmed an IT tech named Marcus from the library into teaching me how to wipe traces online. He thought he was helping a sweet old woman avoid spam calls. He had no idea he was training an Avenger in pearls. The turning point came when I found the letter. It was from Richard, hidden in the back of Ethan's dresser drawer. Short. Cold. Don't contact me unless it's handled. She talks, we both go down. Handled. That word made my stomach twist into a knot that didn't loosen for days. They weren't just cruel. They were planning something. I had lied to keep my family together. But the lie had become a leash, and they meant to tighten it until I stopped breathing. So I made a choice. One night, while Ethan was passed out cold, I walked into his room and stood over him. In my hand was a bottle of sleeping pills I'd crushed into powder and stirred into his whiskey hours before. Not enough to kill him. Just enough to keep him under. I pressed the tip of a black marker to his bare chest and wrote the word liar across his heart. The next morning, when he woke up confused and hungover, I was already in the kitchen, sipping tea like nothing had happened. He never asked what it meant. But I saw the fear flicker in his eyes when he noticed it. He knew something was shifting. I had been quiet for too long. But now I would speak in ways they couldn't ignore. And soon, both of them would learn I didn't need fists to destroy a man. Only truth, carefully weaponized. The day I emptied Ethan's bank account, he was too busy yelling at a customer service rep on speakerphone to notice I had slipped into his room. The passcode to his laptop had always been the same, my birthday. A sick joke, I guess. It opened in seconds. I knew where to look, folders labeled job stuff that had no jobs in them, just crypto accounts, old scam scripts, and a Bitcoin wallet Richard had helped him set up years ago. I transferred it all, every last digital coin, into a cold storage wallet I'd buried in the garden beneath the azaleas I planted the day Ethan was born. When he finally noticed the money was gone, he tore the house apart. He accused his non-existent friends. He accused his father. He even accused the bank. But he never accused me. He couldn't imagine I was capable. That was his fatal flaw. And Richard's, too. That same week, I mailed a thick envelope to the IRS and signed, anonymous, full of just enough evidence to stir the hornet's nest. Bank statements, fraudulent invoices, offshore transactions from Richard's shell company. I knew how to make it look like a whistleblower had turned on him. I even included a type note that said, he thought she was too dumb to know. She wasn't. By the time I was done, Ethan's money was gone. Richard's days in Florida were numbered, and I had only just begun. But revenge, real revenge, isn't loud. It's slow, surgical, intimate. The bruises were fading from my ribs, but the ones inside me pulsed with memory. And I needed him to feel that. So I took the lock off my bedroom door. I let him think I was slipping. I pretended to forget things, left the stove on, misplaced the keys, even called him Richard once by mistake. He laughed behind my back, thinking I was aging into uselessness. He didn't know I was watching him through the mirror I had rigged with a pinhole camera. Recording. Archiving. Building the case I would one day present, not in court this time, but to the world. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. It was late. Rain tapped against the windows. He'd been drinking more than usual, angrier than usual. He accused me of hiding money. Of hiding something. I said nothing. That silence drove him mad. He grabbed me by the collar and screamed, "Do you think I won't kill you, old woman?" His breath stank of whiskey and rot. And I smiled. Not out of fear, but because my hidden microphone caught every word. "You won't remember this," I whispered, "but one day, someone else will." He slapped me hard enough to knock me to the floor. Then he stumbled back into his room, mumbling about finishing it soon. I lay there in the hallway, blood in my mouth, and I felt something cold and certain settle into my chest. It was time. The next morning, I mailed a flash drive to a local journalist. Just the first taste of what was coming. The second copy went into a safety deposit box. The third? I gave it to a woman at church who once told me she ran a domestic abuse shelter. Just in case, I told her with a wink. What he took from me, my pride, my peace, my years, I was taking back one cut at a time. And when it was all over, I wouldn't just be free. I'd be the one who lit the match and walked away smiling while everything they built turned to ash. The first time Ethan truly looked afraid of me, it wasn't because I raised a hand. It was because I didn't flinch when he raised his. He cornered me in the kitchen, fists clenched, spit flying as he accused me of hiding the last of his money. I just stared at him, calm and steady, holding a knife not for defense, but because I had been slicing carrots for stew. He saw the blade and paused, but it wasn't the knife that rattled him. It was the look in my eyes. I wasn't angry. I wasn't afraid. I was ready. He backed away. I didn't move. And from that moment on, something shifted. He stopped hitting me for a while. The tension thickened, though. Paranoia crept into his bones. He started checking the locks 3-4 times a night. He began pacing the hallway like a prisoner trapped in a cell of his own making. He didn't know it yet, but the walls were closing in, one whisper at a time. The journalist I'd sent the flash drive to finally responded, cryptically at first. A burner number. A voice changer. She called herself June, but I doubted that was her name. She said the files were explosive, said she wanted more. I said she'd get them. All of them. In time. But first, I wanted something in return, a story. My story. Unfiltered. Untouched. The truth I never got to tell in court. She agreed on one condition. If I died, the story would go out immediately. If I lived to the end, I could choose how the world would hear it. "Are you afraid?" she asked me once. "No," I said quietly, staring out at the garden where I'd buried Ethan's stolen crypto wallet. He should be. Meanwhile, Richard's world was crumbling too. I watched from the shadows as lawsuits piled up against him. Anonymous tips flooded the IRS, the FBI. His fake company was now under federal investigation. His new wife, yes, he'd married that secretary, filed for divorce after she was served at their condo with a lien on everything. I didn't have to lift a finger. I had only needed to nudge the right dominoes. And then came the moment I'd been waiting for, Ethan's arrest. It was small at first. Petty theft. Shoplifting from a liquor store, half drunk and screaming about injustice. But once the system had him, it dug deeper. He had warrants. He had priors he thought were buried. My files made sure none of it stayed hidden. They found the fraud, the digital scams, the money trail. I made sure the prosecutor had everything, all wrapped in a clean manila envelope mailed from a town he'd never visited. They gave him bail. Of course they did. The system always offers a way out for a price. And I made sure he paid it. I posted his bail with his own money. Quietly. Through a shell account. The clerk never even saw my name. He came home confused, disoriented, and suddenly very, very polite. Said he was sorry. Said he was going to get clean. Said we should start fresh. I nodded, smiled, made his favorite casserole, sat with him while he ate it. I didn't need to poison him. He was already dying, slowly, painfully, from the inside out. And now he was mine. Every move, every breath. I watched it all, controlled it all. Because when a man builds his empire on lies and rage, the most fitting punishment is to make him live just long enough to watch it collapse, brick by brick, at the hands of the woman he thought was too weak to matter. It was Ethan's 35th birthday when I gave him the knife. A real beauty, vintage steel, oak handle, wrapped in a velvet box with a blue ribbon. He opened it with the kind of boyish grin I hadn't seen since before the drinking began, before the fists. He called it badass and asked where I got it. I lied and said it was Dad's old hunting knife. He laughed. He didn't remember Richard had never hunted a day in his life. He carried it everywhere for weeks, clipped it to his belt like some rugged savior. What he didn't know was that the knife wasn't just a gift, it was a symbol, a prophecy. It would eventually taste blood. The only question was, whose? That same week, I started sleeping in the guest room. Told him my back hurt on the old mattress. He barely noticed. Spent his nights on the couch, passed out with the TV playing late-night conspiracy shows, muttering about shadow governments and secret traders. I watched him from the hallway, the knife resting beside his hand like a pet snake. But then something strange happened. He started being nice. Cooked me breakfast one morning. Brought me flowers, cheap carnations, wilted at the tips. Said he was turning over a new leaf. I didn't believe it, but I played along. We sat on the porch, sipping coffee like we used to, like we were two people who hadn't torn each other apart behind closed doors. For a moment, I almost believed it too. Almost. Then I saw the text message. His phone buzzed while he was in the shower. I glanced. Just one line from an unknown number she doesn't suspect. Tomorrow night. The air left my lungs like a kicked-in door. He was planning something. With someone. And whatever it was, it involved me. I didn't confront him. I did what I always did, waited, watched, listened. That night, I stayed up long after he'd gone to bed, scrolling through the burner phone I kept hidden in the coffee tin marked decaf. I texted June, the journalist. Me, it's happening tomorrow. I'll be ready. June, want me to call the police? Me, no. Let me finish what I started. The next day, I cleaned the house top to bottom, washed the walls, laid out clean towels, set the table for two, made his favorite, pork roast with sweet potatoes and extra gravy. He came home late, pupils wide, twitchy. Said, "Got a surprise for you tomorrow, Ma." I smiled. Said, "I've got one for you too, baby." That night, I took the knife while he slept, polished it until it gleamed, and then, with trembling hands, I slid it back into its sheath and laid it gently on his nightstand. Let him wake to it. Let him wonder. Because fear, real fear, isn't about pain. It's about anticipation. I didn't have to stab him. I just had to make sure he never slept soundly again. It was raining the night Ethan tried to end me. Fitting, really. The sky split open like a warning, and every drop felt like the world whispering, "Tonight, it ends." I had spent the entire day moving silently through the house, preparing. Not like someone afraid of death, but like someone arranging furniture before a guest arrives. Calm, methodical. I even wore my favorite dress, the deep burgundy one with lace sleeves, because if I was going to die, I wanted to look like the woman he had never truly seen. He waited until midnight, thinking I'd be asleep. I heard him outside my door, pacing. Then the slow, careful twist of the knob. The door creaked open, and I lay still, breathing evenly, playing the part. I knew what he'd do next. He'd reach for the knife on my nightstand, the one I had returned after cleaning it. The same blade I'd traced with my fingers, imagining how it would feel if it was ever pressed to my throat. But what he didn't know, what he could never imagine, is that I had replaced the real knife with a replica. Same weight, Same feel, but the blade was dull, just sharp enough to leave a scratch, not a wound. Just enough to make him overconfident. Just enough to let him try. He moved fast, clumsy with panic. I let out a gasp, just a small one, then rolled off the bed before the blade hit. He lunged, and we both crashed to the floor. The sound of his fury filled the room like thunder. But I had planned this moment down to the breath. Under the bed, taped in place, was a taser. Cheap, secondhand, but it worked. I grabbed it, flipped the switch, and before he could react, I lit him up like a goddamn Christmas tree. He screamed, convulsed, dropped the knife. I stood over him, panting, heart hammering, dress torn, sweat pouring down my back. For one sharp second, I considered finishing him right then. But death would have been too kind. He needed to live with what he had become. When he came to, I was already standing over him with the camera running. I made him say it all. Every confession. Every plan. Every blow. He cried, begged, swore he'd change. And I recorded every pathetic second of it. I trusted you, I said, voice shaking. I lied for you. I loved you. He sobbed. Please, Mom, please don't ruin my life. I leaned in, close enough to see the fear trembling in his pupils. Oh, baby, I whispered, you ruined mine first. Then I walked away, left him on the floor, trembling, broken, defeated, not dead, but emptied. And I knew then, without a shred of doubt, that it wasn't over. Because the worst part of revenge is knowing how much further you can still go. I had spent years disappearing in my own home. At first, it was subtle, interrupted mid-sentence, talked over, dismissed like I was an echo in a room full of louder men. Then it became something more deliberate. My name stopped being Mom or Honey and turned into she. As in, she's crazy, or she's just being dramatic. But it wasn't until Richard forged my signature on the power of attorney papers that I realized I wasn't just vanishing, I was being erased. He mailed them to the bank while I was recovering from a fall down the stairs, one I still don't believe was an accident. I remember waking up with bruises on my ribs and Richard standing at the foot of my bed, arms crossed, like a warden watching a prisoner stir. You need to rest, he said, as if he cared. He'd already begun selling the car in my name by the time I could walk again. By then, Ethan had stopped hiding his contempt. He'd leave the front door wide open when I was home alone, told me it'd be easier for someone to come take me out and no one would ask questions. I learned to barricade myself inside with a chair under the knob and a carving fork in hand. Not to use it, just to feel something solid between me and the fear. But here's the thing about disappearing. It makes you weightless. And weightlessness is dangerous. It lets you slip through cracks, eavesdrop, learn things. Like the fact that Richard was planning to fake my dementia. That he'd been collecting evidence, doctored recordings of me forgetting things, medicine bottles he'd tampered with, blank notebooks where I supposedly lost track of time. They were building a story, one brick at a time. And I was building mine. I found the hidden camera he planted in the kitchen. Left it there. Started talking to myself while cooking, calm, coherent, deliberate. Today I'm making stew. 1 onion, 2 carrots. Richard thinks I don't know. But I do. I made sure the date showed on the microwave clock behind me. Then I left the memory card in the toaster slot. I knew he'd find it. I wanted him to. Let him think I was slipping. Let him believe I was too far gone to stop them. It made what came next so much sweeter. Because one night, as Richard drank his 3rd scotch and ranted about my mental decline, I brought him his pills with a smile. The same ones he'd insisted I take, the ones he said were for calming my nerves. I'd switched them 2 days earlier with laxatives. He spent the night in the bathroom, cursing and sweating. That gave me time. I copied everything. His bank statements, the wire transfers, the text messages he thought he'd deleted. And I printed the affidavit from the notary that proved I never signed a damn thing. I slipped it all into a manila envelope marked with a single word, reclamation. Then I mailed it, to his employer, to his lawyer, to the real estate agent trying to sell our house out from under me. One copy went to the local police. Another to a women's advocacy group June connected me with. They were about to learn something Ethan and Richard never understood. A woman doesn't vanish. She waits. And when she returns, she brings fire. He always liked chamomile. Said it helped him sleep. I remember when he used to take it with honey, back when kindness still lived in his voice, and his hands only knew how to build, not break. But that man died years ago. The one who sipped tea beside me on cold nights and promised the world was still good, he rotted somewhere deep inside Richard's body. Still, I brewed it for him that night. A generous spoon of honey. A little lemon. 2 pills dissolved so smoothly he'd never taste the bitterness until it settled into his blood. Nothing lethal. Just enough to make him groggy. Slow. Easy to manipulate. Long day? I asked, handing him the mug. He looked tired. Not just from the scotch or the scheming, but from the weight of trying to juggle too many lies at once. He nodded, barely registering the smile I'd rehearsed in the mirror. The one that said, "I forgive you. Let's move forward." We sat together in the living room, like any aging couple trying to make peace with their years. I let him ramble about lawyers and taxes and Ethan's upcoming hearing. I even reached over and touched his knee, let my fingers rest there like they used to back when I thought this man would grow old beside me, not drag me into the grave with him. His eyelids drooped before he finished the mug. I waited 10 minutes, just long enough for the sedation to kick in. Then I stood. Quietly. Deliberately. In the office upstairs, I turned on the printer and let the pages fly. Financial records, bank fraud, screenshots of texts with Ethan planning how to move assets into offshore accounts. There were even emails to an old friend of his, someone I'd never met, detailing how I was getting worse. He was planning to check me into a care home, sell the house, and liquidate the rest. But I beat him to it. Every copy went into a fresh folder. On the front, I wrote a name he wouldn't recognize, Detective Calloway. Another of June's contacts. An old-school type who still believed in truth and justice and women who knew how to pick themselves up from the dirt. When I came back downstairs, Richard was slumped in his chair, groaning, mouth open like a fish out of water. "You poisoned me," he rasped, but I shook my head. "No. You did that to yourself a long time ago." I leaned in close enough to see the sweat bead on his brow. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," I whispered. "I stopped being afraid the night you left me bleeding in the hallway and told Ethan not to call 911. That was the night I buried the woman you married. And dug up the woman who's going to destroy you." He tried to stand, but the pills were doing their job. He slumped again, cursing through slurred lips. I kissed his cheek. "Sleep well, sweetheart. Tomorrow, you'll wake up in a world where I'm not your victim. I'm your judge." And with that, I took the folders and walked out into the storm, the wind howling like it was cheering me on. Richard always thought he was smarter than everyone else. Slicker. Untouchable. He'd walk into a room like he owned the air, make women feel small with a glance, and charm judges with a smile that never reached his eyes. For decades, he moved through life like a shadow you couldn't quite pin down, one step ahead, always just out of reach. But shadows can't outrun storms. And I had become one. The morning after the tea, Richard woke up groggy, sweating, and confused. He stumbled around the house like a ghost trying to remember its own death. He didn't notice the missing files. Didn't ask about the envelope that had vanished from his locked desk drawer. He didn't even ask why my eyes were dry for the first time in years. By the time he pieced it together, it was too late. First came the call from his bank, account frozen. Then the knock at the door, 2 suits from the state's financial crimes unit. I watched him from the hallway, arms crossed, as he stammered through excuses, asking if this was all some kind of mistake. The agents just handed him a warrant. I could see his throat bob as he read it. "I need to speak to my lawyer," he said. "I already did," I said, stepping into view. The look on his face? It tasted better than revenge. You see, I hadn't just sent evidence. I'd spent weeks setting fire to every bridge he thought was safe. The accountant? Turned. His assistant? Flipped. The fake consulting firm he funneled bribes through? Already seized. I even found the woman he'd cheated on me with back in '92. Turns out, he screwed her over too. She was more than happy to give June a quote or two. The headlines wrote themselves. And Ethan? Oh, Ethan was spiraling. He was back in jail within a week, violation of bail. His rage exploded in public this time. He smashed a store window with a tire iron and screamed that he was being hunted by ghosts. The mugshot made the evening news. Disheveled, eyes wild. The knife I'd given him clipped to his waistband like a joke he didn't understand. Richard tried to bargain. I'll give you the house. The money, everything, he whispered that night, standing in the ruins of his career. Just make the stop. But I didn't want his money. I didn't want the house. I wanted him to feel it, to feel what it was like to lose the safety he clung to like armor. To wake up and not know what piece of his world would collapse next. To live in the breathless silence between consequences. I didn't scream. I didn't slap him. I just walked past him, slow and steady, and locked my bedroom door for the first time in 27 years. He banged on it once, twice, then never again. He knew. The storm had come, and I wasn't going to leave a single part of his legacy standing. People love a villain when he's charming. They'll let him slide with a wink and a lie if he wears a suit and speaks in smooth tones. Richard had built a lifetime on that kind of performance. But when you strip the mask, when you pull the monster into the light, suddenly the crowd isn't clapping anymore. They're staring, whispering, waiting for blood. I gave it to them. June called at dawn. It's out, she said, her voice tight with adrenaline. Front page. Online and in print. Every detail. They're going to tear him apart. I didn't ask to see it. I just stood at the kitchen sink, washing the same glass over and over while the headlines spread like wildfire. Respected consultant accused of fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy with son. His face was plastered beneath it, red-eyed, unshaven, and small. So small, the reporters showed up first. 2 of them, then 4, then a van. They gathered outside the house, cameras lifted like weapons, microphones extended toward the windows. I opened the blinds. Just a little, enough for them to see me. Then I turned on the front porch light. A signal. He was still in his robe, slumped on the couch, barely able to hold his head up. I told him the press was waiting. Told him they had questions about the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the forged documents, the night he left me bleeding in the hallway and told Ethan to let her learn. He shook his head. You wouldn't do that to me. You're my wife. I smiled. No, Richard. I was your cover. Then I opened the door. They swarmed like bees. Flashes, questions, shouting. He stumbled out, shielding his face, calling them vultures. But vultures only come when the body is already dead. And Richard? He was just bones now. Dry, cracked, hollow bones full of guilt and rot. I stood behind him on the steps. Let them see me. The bruises had faded, but I wore a sleeveless blouse on purpose. Let the camera catch the faint outlines on my arm. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. My silence was its own testimony. By evening, the board at his company had suspended him. 3 more women came forward, former clients. Women who claimed he'd threatened, coerced, manipulated. His empire wasn't just collapsing, it was imploding. And Ethan? He called from jail. I didn't answer. I sent the call straight to voicemail and deleted the message before I even listened. Later that night, I sat alone with a glass of wine and watched the news. They showed the footage of Richard covering his face with trembling hands, his voice cracking as he begged the press to leave. Then the anchor said my name. My full name. Not as his wife, but as a whistleblower, a survivor, a woman whose silence had ended with thunder. I toasted the screen. Because now, Now the world knew the truth. And I was just getting started. The letter came in a plain white envelope, no return address, just my name written in his familiar block handwriting, careful, like he was afraid of pressing too hard. It smelled faintly of scotch and sweat, even through the paper. I didn't open it right away. I left it on the kitchen table for hours while I swept the floor, scrubbed the counters, and replayed memories like film reels soaked in gasoline. When I finally did open it, I wore gloves. His words were what I expected, hollow apologies dressed in the language of regret. I never meant to hurt you. I was under pressure. You changed. Blame wrapped in ribbon. Every sentence was a plea for redemption disguised as confession. There was no mention of the bruises. No acknowledgement of the time he spat in my face and said I was just a bitter old woman clinging to scraps. Instead, he begged for my silence. Asked me to remember the good years, to think of Ethan, to stop ruining what's left. I folded the letter neatly and burned it in the sink. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just watched the flame eat the lies until nothing remained but black flakes swirling down the drain. Then I called the reporter who first broke the story. Gave her a quote. Just 6 words. Tell them I'm not done yet. That afternoon, I drove to the nursing home where Richard's mother lay fading in a shell of skin and breath. He hadn't visited her in 2 years. I did. Once a month. Quietly. Not for her, but for me. Because I knew where his cruelty came from. I needed to see the tree before I understood the fruit. She blinked slowly when I walked in, her eyes cloudy but tracking. I sat beside her and took her hand. Your son tried to destroy me, I said gently. But you already knew he was capable of that, didn't you? She squeezed my hand, just once. Weak. But there. I left a photo of Ethan and Richard behind. Not as a memory. As a warning. For the staff. For anyone who might care. That night, I updated the lawyer handling the civil case. The charges were stacking: embezzlement, tax fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy. I gave him the name of another victim. A young woman Richard mentored until she turned down his advances. She thought no one would believe her. But I did. I met her for coffee, gave her a folder of documentation, recordings, witness statements. I didn't just believe her, I armed her. And when she cried, saying I thought I was alone, I smiled and said, that's what they want us to think. The next morning, another lawsuit was filed. And the day after that, I received a package from Richard. No note. Just a necklace he once gave me for our anniversary. Gold. Expensive. Heavy. I sold it to a pawn shop for pennies, then donated the money to a shelter for abused women. I didn't need his guilt. I needed his legacy to rot. Because when a man like that finally falls, you don't catch him. You let him hit the bottom. And then you bury the apology right beside him. I knew it was him before I opened the door. There was a pause in the knock, like hesitation pressed into wood. 3 slow taps, then silence. I stood on the other side, breath held, heart like a drum caught in a memory. I hadn't seen Ethan in nearly 2 months, not since his court-appointed silence, and the latest restraining order kept him away. But a mother knows. No matter what he'd done, he was still mine. When I pulled the door open, I saw it. The boy who used to run barefoot through our yard, now grown and twisted into a man with my eyes, but none of my softness. His hair was disheveled, face sunken, that false confidence finally stripped bare. Can I come in? He asked. I didn't answer. I stepped aside, not to welcome him, but to see if he'd walk in knowing the weight of what he'd done. He did. He sat at the kitchen table, the same one he once smashed in a rage when I told him no more money, no more excuses. This time, he didn't speak right away. He just stared at his hands. They used to be so small. I used to hold them while he slept. I read the articles, he said finally. The lawsuits, the stories, about Dad. And about you? I asked, my voice flat. His eyes flicked up. There was something there, maybe guilt, Maybe just the recognition that this wasn't the home he once ruled through fear. I thought you were lying, he admitted. At first. I told myself you were exaggerating, trying to ruin him because the marriage fell apart. And now? I asked. His jaw tightened. Now I don't know what to believe. But I remember things I used to laugh off. The way he yelled. The nights he locked you out of the bedroom. I thought that was just marriage. I thought, he trailed off. You thought hurting me was love, I said. Because that's what he taught you. He looked like he'd been slapped. I saw the fight drain from him. Just a boy again. Just a child who didn't know how deep the poison ran. I'm sorry, he said. For what I did. For what I didn't stop. I wanted to believe him. God help me, I wanted to believe that there was something left in him worth saving. But belief had cost me my bones, my blood, my dignity. I couldn't afford it anymore. Sorry doesn't stitch broken ribs, I said. It doesn't erase bruises or the years I spent praying I wouldn't wake up. Sorry is a seed. It means nothing if you don't water it. He nodded, silent. Then reached into his coat pocket and slid something across the table, a photograph. The three of us, taken when Ethan was 10. We were smiling. Whole. I had that glow in my cheeks I hadn't seen in decades. I don't know if I'm redeemable, he whispered. But I want to try. I want to know who you were before he turned you into this ghost. I stared at the picture. I was never a ghost, I said. I was a fire smothered under his hand. You watched him do it. Now you want me to forgive you for holding the match. He didn't argue. That, at least, was new. I took the photo. Not as a keepsake. As evidence. Of what once was. And what would never be again. You can try, I said, finally. You can show up. You can listen. You can build something clean from the ashes. But you don't get to be my son again. Not yet. He nodded. Stood. Hesitated. I'll be back, he said. I didn't say goodbye. Because this wasn't an ending. This was a verdict. It came in the form of a voicemail. No name, just a low, tired voice that said, I saw the news. I've been waiting for this day. I think we need to talk. At first, I thought it was one of the lawyers. Or another journalist, fishing for a new headline. But the voice, it had an ache in it, an old wound buried under every syllable. She left a number. I called. Her name was Angela. She said she knew Richard before he was Richard. Back when he was 21, fresh out of a different state with a different last name, before he reinvented himself into the charming consultant who could sell rust to a welder. I knew him when he was just Rick, she said. Rick Mathers. He worked construction and slept in the back of his car. He wasn't smart, just slick and cruel. I stood at the kitchen window as she spoke, the phone pressed tight against my ear. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. Angela had been 17 when she met him. He told me I was special, she said. That we were soulmates. Said all the things I needed to hear. Her voice cracked. Then he got me pregnant. The rest of her story came in jagged pieces. He left town before the baby was born. Changed his name. Said he had bigger things ahead. She raised the child alone, and when she tried to track him down years later, for help, for support, for anything, he threatened her. Told her to forget he ever existed. He was always trying to become someone else, she said. Always running. But he can't run from what he did to me. Or to you. I asked about the child. Her voice quieted. He's gone, she whispered. Overdose, for years ago. Never got to meet the man who made him. Never got an apology. And just like that, a piece of Richard the First never knew existed. Disappeared forever. I felt cold. Not because of the betrayal, I was numb to those now, but because of the silence that followed. A silence that held more truth than Richard had ever offered me. Angela wanted nothing from me. No favors. No publicity. Just to say it out loud. To someone who knew what it felt like to be used and discarded like a coat in spring. Before she hung up, she said one last thing. Men like him, they don't die in prisons or hospitals. They die when the world sees who they really are. You've already killed him. The rest is just burial. That night, I stood in the hallway where Richard once pinned me against the wall and called me a burden. I touched the spot with my fingers. And I whispered, "Rick Mathers. Let his real name rot. Let his secrets choke in the open air. Let the truth wrap around his legacy like vines around a tombstone." He ran from his past. But I just handed it back to him, brick by brick. It arrived on a Wednesday, thick, expensive paper tucked in an envelope sealed with a lawyer's crest. No return address. No warning. Just my name in black ink, printed with the kind of precision that always means danger. I opened it with a knife, not scissors. I didn't want it to feel ordinary. I wanted it to feel like war. Inside were 6 pages. Typed. Neat. Cold. It was from Richard's attorney. Not the one handling his financial crimes. This was someone new. Someone hired to hurt. The letter was a formal declaration. A statement of intent to countersue. Apparently, Richard was claiming I had defamed him. That my accusations were malicious fabrications and that I'd colluded with journalists to systematically dismantle his reputation and professional standing. I read every word slowly. Once. Twice. Then I laughed. Not loud. Not hysterical. Just a soft, bitter laugh that felt like it came from the bottom of a grave. He was losing, and he knew it. So now he was trying to claw his way back through paperwork and intimidation. The same tricks he used on clients and colleagues. The same tone he used on me after every bruise. "Look what you made me do." But this time, I didn't tremble. I took the letter and laid it on my kitchen table. Then I opened my laptop. I started a new folder. Labeled it, "His Last Threat." I uploaded the letter. Then I added the recordings. The ones June helped me gather. The screenshots. The financial spreadsheets. The photos of my injuries. The testimony of 3 women who'd come forward in the last month alone. I compiled it all into a tidy, brutal package. And I sent it. Not just to my lawyer, but to the State Bar Association. To the Ethics Board. To the newspaper that had been hounding me for an exclusive follow-up. By sunset, 3 different inboxes lit up with replies. One of them just said, "We'll bury him for you." That night, I sat on my back porch, staring up at a sky thick with stars. I thought about all the letters I'd written over the years, birthday cards for Ethan he never opened, apology notes to Richard the First was too afraid to send. Pages of pain, scribbled and torn, always crumpled in the bottom of a drawer. But this letter, this one was the last. The last time he'd tried to silence me. And the first time I used his own words as the rope. The next morning, a new article dropped, "Victim turned victor. How one woman exposed a monster's final game." I didn't speak. I didn't celebrate. I just folded the letter, placed it in the fireplace, and watched it burn slow, every corner curling inward like it knew it was defeated. Because threats only have power when you're afraid. And I had nothing left to fear. I didn't plan to be in the courtroom. I swore I wouldn't look him in the eye again. But something made me go. Maybe it was the pull of a mother's final thread. Maybe I needed to see with my own eyes who Ethan would choose when the world was watching. The courtroom was cold, too clean, like pain wasn't supposed to happen in a place like that. Richard sat to the left, thinner now, gray creeping into his temples, a man unraveling at the seams. He didn't see me when I slipped in. But Ethan did. He was called to the stand. And when he raised his hand to swear in, I couldn't help but remember that same hand slamming a door in my face, throwing a lamp at the wall, yanking my wrist hard enough to leave bruises. The hand of my son, the hand of my betrayer. The prosecutor asked him if he'd witnessed his father's abuse. He paused. The room held its breath. "Yes," Ethan said finally, voice hoarse. "I saw it. I heard it. I ignored it." A whisper rippled across the courtroom. The prosecutor leaned in, pressing gently. "Why didn't you come forward before now?" Ethan looked at me. Just for a second. Long enough to let the weight settle. Because I thought he loved us. And I thought love meant survival. That hurting someone was better than losing them. I was wrong. A silence thicker than any verdict fell. Then came the defense attorney, sharp, precise, like a surgeon with a scalpel instead of a knife. She smiled. "Mr. Carter, were you ever struck by your father?" "No," Ethan answered. "But you were by your mother, correct?" I flinched. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Once." She slapped me. I deserved it. "Once?" The woman asked, voice syrupy. "Are you sure? Because your father's statement implies there was a pattern of emotional instability, mood swings, aggression. From him," Ethan snapped. "My father was a master manipulator. He made us believe she was the problem. That if she cried, it was drama. If she bled, she fell. If she screamed, she was ungrateful. But she was the only one trying to protect us, even from ourselves." The court clerk asked for order as the murmurs grew louder. I sat frozen. He wasn't protecting me. Not really. He wasn't saving me. He was saving himself. But even that small flicker of truth was something. After the session ended, he didn't approach me. He didn't try to say goodbye. He walked out through a side door with his head down, like a man who finally understood the wreckage in his wake. Outside, I found a single sheet of paper stuck beneath my windshield wiper. I unfolded it slowly. It was a quote, handwritten. "Sometimes the hardest person to forgive is the version of yourself who didn't know better." Unknown, I don't know if Ethan meant it for me, or for himself. But as I stood there, the wind tugging at my coat and the courthouse behind me like a wound still bleeding, I realized something. Some confessions come too late. And some are just early enough to make the ruin mean something. The letter came in a pale blue envelope, handwritten, delicate, the kind of paper no one uses anymore. It smelled faintly of rose water and old hope. I hadn't seen her name in over 30 years. But there it was, neat and elegant on the return address. Margot Lane. My college roommate. The woman who knew me when I still wore sundresses and believed in first kisses, not final blows. The woman who danced barefoot with me under dorm lights and whispered that we'd take the world by storm, two stubborn girls against the silence. The letter was simple. "Saw your name in the news. Didn't want to believe it. But now I think I always knew. You changed the moment you married him." I should have said something. I should have dragged you away when I saw your smile die. I didn't. But I see you now. And I'm here if you want to remember who you were before he made you forget. I stared at those lines like they were a map back to myself. Margot had been there the night I first met Richard, back when he was charming, magnetic, the kind of man who made you feel like you were the only person in the room. She warned me. Quietly, but firmly. "He watches you like he's measuring how much to take." I laughed. Told her she was jealous. I was young, and love was a fever I didn't want cured. But Margot saw it. The way he isolated me. The subtle corrections. The tiny digs that slowly hollowed me out. She saw it all. And then I stopped writing. Stopped calling. Because that's what he wanted. When I picked up the phone and dialed her number, my hand shook like it hadn't in months. I was afraid not of her judgment, but of what I'd hear in her voice. Pity, mourning, or worst of all, forgiveness I didn't deserve. She answered on the second ring. "Hello, Margot," I whispered. She was silent for a moment. Then, "Took you long enough." And just like that, I wept. Not the silent tears I'd mastered over the years. These were deep, ugly sobs pulled from a part of me I thought had been locked away forever. We talked for hours. About everything. About nothing. About the girl I was and the fire she used to carry behind her ribs. "I want her back," I said through tears. "She's not gone," Margot replied. "She just learned how to survive in the dark." That night, I pulled out a box from the back of my closet. Inside, photos, old journals, a scarf Margot gave me the day I left for my honeymoon. It smelled like dust and lavender. Like memory. I lit candles and sat in silence, reading my own handwriting from decades ago. The words of a girl who believed in fairness, who wanted to write novels and drink red wine on balconies, who swore she'd never let any man dim her. And I wrote her a letter. Not as a goodbye, as an apology. Because I let her down. But now I was bringing her back. They called me from the hospital at 2:14 a.m. A nurse with a tired voice and clipped words. Richard had overdosed. Prescription pills. Cheap whiskey. Found slumped in his holding cell before his transfer to state prison. They'd pumped his stomach, stabilized him. He asked for you, she said. You're still listed as next of kin. The irony wasn't lost on me. He tried to take everything from me, my peace, my body, my mind. And now, failing that, he tried to take the last thing he controlled, his exit. A clean escape. A coward's door. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I dressed slowly, all black, no makeup. Wore clothes. When I walked into the room, he looked smaller than I remembered. Tubes in his arm. Lips dry and cracked. Still alive, but barely. He opened his eyes when he heard my heels click across the floor. Came to say goodbye, he rasped, voice like rust scraping metal. I stood beside his bed, arms crossed. I came to make sure you didn't get to die thinking you'd won. He gave a soft, humorless laugh. Still so dramatic. I leaned in close, my voice sharp and steady. You tried to escape what you did. But here's the thing, Richard, you don't get to die clean. You don't get to vanish into some tragic story. You don't deserve peace. He coughed, turned his head. They'll make me out to be a monster anyway. What more do you want? I smiled then. Cold. Calm. I want you to live long enough to feel it. Every article. Every closed door. Every reputation ruined. I want you to rot in a bed no one visits. I want you to taste what silence feels like when no one's afraid of you anymore. He didn't respond. So I pulled a folded piece of paper from my coat pocket and placed it on the table beside his bed. What's that? He asked. The name you tried to bury. Rick Mathers. Your real name. Birth records. The old arrest from 1983. Angela's statement. I gave it all to the press. His eyes widened. A flicker of fear. Real fear. The kind that no longer held power over me. You'll never be Richard Carter again, I whispered. You'll die Rick. Broke. Disgraced. Alone. He closed his eyes. Do you think any of this makes you better than me? He said weakly. No, I said, straightening. It makes me free. I turned to leave, but paused at the door. Oh, and the next time you try to die, do it right. You're not even good at that. I walked out before he could speak again. Because I had more to do. And I was done giving air to dead men. I hadn't seen my sister in over 16 years. Not since my wedding. Not since she stood stiff in a blue bridesmaid dress, watching me walk down the aisle toward Richard, her lips pressed into a line so thin it could have sliced glass. She never liked him. And I never forgave her for being right. When I called her, she sounded surprised. You're still alive, she said quietly. I am, I answered. And I need to see you. She agreed. One afternoon. One coffee. Neutral ground. We met in a little diner 2 towns over. She was thinner, paler, her hair streaked with gray. She looked like someone who'd spent years carrying questions no one wanted answers to. I slid into the booth across from her. Neither of us smiled. She looked me over, her eyes lingering on the scar near my hairline, the one I stopped hiding. I read about it, she said. Did you? She nodded. All of it. Every article. Every photo. Every detail they printed about what he did to you. What Ethan did to you. I stared at her. My throat felt tight. Then tell me, where were you? When I was limping through holidays, when I was hiding bruises with scarves in July, when I called and you never picked up, where were you? She blinked fast. You stopped calling. I begged you to come see me. You said you were busy. I was busy, she snapped. Busy watching my sister disappear. Every time I saw you, you looked more like a ghost. And every time I tried to talk to you about it, you shut me out. I was trapped, I hissed. You were also stubborn. You hated pity. You made it impossible to help you without becoming your enemy. And I didn't want to be your enemy. So I left. I swallowed the scream climbing up my spine. So you saved yourself. And let me drown. She looked down at her coffee, then whispered yes. I did. Silence thickened between us, heavy and jagged. You weren't the only one who bled, she said finally. You think I didn't warn you? I grieved you like a death. Every night. And when I read the truth, I hated myself for walking away. But I also hated you for proving me right. That shattered something in both of us. She reached into her purse, pulled out a small photo. It was us, ages ago, at the lake, holding ice cream cones, laughing. My hair in messy curls. Her arm looped around mine. I keep this, she said, to remember who you were before he buried you. I stared at that photo. My throat closed. I'm trying to find her again, I whispered. Then stop blaming everyone for not saving you. And start forgiving yourself for staying. I didn't say anything. I just took the photo. When we stood to leave, she hugged me. Brief. Tight. And this time, I didn't pull away. I walked back to my car with a weight lifted and another one planted, grief and grace, balancing inside me like two sides of the same blade. Because the truth was this: some people fail you. Some people watch you fall. And some people were just trying to survive your storm, too. I heard the knock just after sunset. Not a frantic pounding. Not a neighbor's polite tap. 3 slow, even knocks, like someone practiced them. When I opened the door, Ethan was standing there, holding a cardboard box that looked too light for how heavy his eyes were. We hadn't spoken since the trial. Since he stood in front of the world and chose truth over legacy. I wasn't sure if I'd ever see him again. Part of me didn't want to. Part of me ached for it. He didn't ask to come in. He just held out the box. I found it in his storage unit, he said. He must have kept it hidden all these years. I didn't read everything. I thought you should be the one. I didn't take it at first. Just stared. What is it? I asked quietly. Ethan swallowed. Proof. Of how deep it went. That was all. I stepped aside, and for the first time in months, my son walked through my door. We didn't speak as I opened the box. Inside, old journals, manila envelopes, receipts, photographs, and most damning of all, a red leather notebook. I recognized it immediately. It was mine. I thought he destroyed this, I whispered. Ethan's voice cracked. He didn't destroy anything. He collected it. Like trophies. I flipped it open. My handwriting filled every page. Pages I'd written in secret, documenting every shove, every broken dish, every whispered apology that came wrapped in threats. But that wasn't all. There were letters I never mailed. Photocopies of bank statements, proof of money siphoned from my inheritance, forged signatures, even fake prescriptions written under my name. And then, I found the photo. One I'd never seen. It was me, asleep. Face bruised. Eyes swollen shut. Taken from above. From our bedroom. I dropped it like it burned. Ethan knelt and picked it up. His hand shook. I didn't know it was this bad, he said. I didn't want to know. You helped him cover it up, I said, voice hollow. You stood beside him while I bled. He nodded. Didn't argue. Didn't defend. I was weak. I thought I was being loyal. I didn't understand that loyalty to evil makes you evil too. Silence. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a letter. This was addressed to you. He never mailed it. I think he wrote it before he tried to kill himself. I took it with trembling hands. Mom, I chose him over you. Over everything. And I'll never deserve your forgiveness. But I'm not asking for that now. I'm asking you to remember one thing. Before he got to me, I was yours. And I'm trying to find that boy again. If there's any part of you that can look at me without hatred, please let me come home someday. Even if I have to earn it one step at a time. I stared at the letter until the ink blurred. Then I looked at him, my son. The boy I carried. The man who hurt me. The man who, somehow, was still trying. "Don't come back expecting forgiveness," I said. "I won't," he replied. "But you can come back and tell me the truth. Every time. No more lies." He nodded, eyes full of something close to hope. We sat on the floor for hours, sorting through the rot of a man who built a kingdom out of silence. And as the sun began to rise, I realized something. Revenge had freed me, but truth might be what heals me. I stood alone at the house where it all began. The windows were broken now, weeds curling through the porch, the paint peeled back like old skin. Time had touched it, but not nearly enough. Some things rot too slowly. This was the house where I lost myself, where I stitched smiles over broken teeth, where I learned how to muffle screams into pillows, where I made excuses for bruises and called it love. Now I was back, not as a victim, but as a witness. I walked through the front door without flinching. The floorboards still groaned under my feet, but the sound no longer scared me. It sounded like bones finally settling. I carried a box under my arm. Inside it, everything I'd taken from Richard's storage unit. His secrets, his trophies, his lies, every scrap of cruelty he'd tried to preserve. I placed it in the center of the living room, and I lit a match. The flames caught quickly, licking up the paper like it had been starving for justice. Smoke curled around me, thick and acrid. I didn't move. I watched it burn. Watched him burn. No more shadows. No more secrets. When I stepped back outside, the morning was cool. Clean. My heart beat steady. I had scars, but they no longer told his story. They told mine. I didn't know if Ethan would ever fully understand what he'd helped destroy, or what it would take to rebuild something between us. But the door was open now. The chain was off. And that was enough. Before I left, I took one last look at the crumbling house. Then I said the words I'd waited a lifetime to speak. "I was never yours to break." Then I walked away. And this time, I didn't look back. Thank you for listening to this journey on Twisted Tales and Truths. If this story moved you, if you saw even a sliver of yourself in her pain or her power, please like, comment, and subscribe. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? Your voice matters here. Because every story deserves to be heard, even the twisted ones.